In this lesson titled If Functions, we're in Lesson 10, If Functions and Vlookup Workbook, and we're currently on tab If Function. If Function is a very powerful function that lets you do some pseudo programming. Like it sounds, it's saying if this, then that. Let's just kind of jump right in and explain it. I think it'll make a lot of sense to you. Here's our goal. Our goal is we want to give free shipping for over $4,500. So here's a subtotal. When that's over $4,500, we want the shipping to be free. Otherwise, the shipping is 4%. So it might be quite easy to just come in here and say equals G2 times 4%. And that would just give all of them 4% shipping right here. But we only want that to be the case if it's under $4,500. Otherwise, it's free. So here's our if function. Of course, it starts with an equals, and we say if, and then we can use tab to select that because it's already selected in blue. Otherwise, we can double click it. We get our parentheses, and we see down here our little screen tip is giving us a clue that the next thing we need is a logical test. Well, the logical test is if, over here, G2 is greater than 4,500. So that's our logical test. And then we're ready for a comma. And you can see as soon as I hit a comma, it changes our focus here to value if true. So, logical test, if G2 is greater than 4,500, then if true, 0. Right? They pay nothing if it's greater than 4,500, comma, and we shift now to value if false. Well, otherwise, we want them to pay 4%. So I'll say 4%, and 4% times what? Well, 4% times this G2 again. And now we finished, and so I can just hit enter, and it'll put in the last parentheses that a function or a formula has to have. And so then we get this amount right here. So we'll click on this. Now we want to fill it all the way down, so I can grab my autofill handle and I can just pull this down. It'll fill it in. But I want to show you one more shortcut. You can also just double click. And in this case, I have about 100 rows here. So I just want to double click and it will fill it all the way down. Well, let's see how our if statement did. So here we are less than 4,500, so we had to pay the full 4%. Here we are greater than 4,500, so we paid nothing. And, pretty much that looks like it's working quite well. Well, what about here where it's exactly 4,500? Doesn't seem quite fair. They did get to 4,500. Why don't we say up here in our formula, greater than 4,500, how about greater and equal to, or greater or equal to 4,500. So I can just add an equal symbol here. And this is in standard format. You don't use equals or greater than. It's always greater than or equals. So it's the greater than sign and the equal sign. So if I hit enter to accept this formula, and now I'm going to click right here on my autofill handle, but I'm going to double click and fill it all the way down. And you'll see that my 4,500 went to 0 because it's equal to 4,500. So pretty powerful tool to make a logical test and answer for us. Now we can make these if statements a little more complex. So let's take a look at that. Here's our formula, and we're saying if G2 is greater or equal to 45, then give them 0. Otherwise, 4% for everybody. So on this part where it says otherwise, we can add another if statement. So I'm going to click right here after the true statement, and just before the false statement, I'm going to say if, parentheses, G2 is greater than 3,000, comma, value if true, 2% times G2, comma, otherwise 4%. And we are going to need one more parentheses at the end, and I'll hit enter. If you don't add the extra parentheses, you will get an error and it will offer to auto-fix it for you. So now let's double-click and see how these change. Now a couple of our numbers changed right here, and you'll notice that anything less than $3,000 had to pay the full 4%, $120 here on 2009-9. But once we hit this threshold of $3,000, the price for shipping dropped in half to $61.20. So a little more complicated. We put an if inside an if, and that if is after the true value, then you can put in the other value before it gets to false, and then end with finally the false statement that will apply to everything that these two ifs did not cover. Very powerful, although it may take a little time to get used to the concept.